So this tank right behind me is the second build for our fish room gallery. Water is cloudy because we just set this tank up yesterday, and as new tanks do, they get a little bit cloudy sometimes, but that is not the point of this video. The point of this video is as I was setting up the gallery, I knew I had two 75 gallons, two 125s, and a 50-gallon lowboy that was going in the gallery. I wanted to initially, my plan was to just buy the aquarium stands because I didn't feel like building them. I've built enough over my time, and I didn't want to do that anymore. Well, I had a little bit of sticker shock when I went to go price out a stand for a 125-gallon aquarium. It was $1,200, and everywhere I looked was pretty much $1,000 to $1,200, and then if you wanted it shipped, it was going to cost you even more money. That is not a price I was willing to pay for a stand, so I decided to build one myself. That's the stand that you see right behind me. I'm going to show you how to do it. By the way, this entire stand cost $160 to build. I built two of them for around 350 bucks. It's going to hold way more than any stand you're going to find at the store. And by the way, not only is this good for a 125, but you could use it for your standard 150 as well. Let's show you how we did it. All right, so the first thing I want to show you here before we actually get into the build is I usually just rough sketch these things out. It is clear that I am not an artist, and so this is the rough sketch for the 125. I've got some measurements on here. The 125s that we have are 72.5 inches long, 18.5 inches wide, and the height is irrelevant here. But what I've decided to do for a couple of reasons is, first you have to choose your height, really, of the stand. That's the only choice you really have. The length here of 73.5 inches, I always make it an additional inch longer than the stand itself, so the stand is not sitting on the very, 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 very edge of the top frame. And then same thing with the width. Since I know the tank is going to be 18.5 inches, I increase that by 1 inch, so it's 19.5 inches wide. So the height is really a personal decision. I chose 34 inches for a couple reasons. One, I want the 125s to be a little bit higher, and you can basically see them from both a seated and a standing position. And then two, based on where the tanks are going to be for our live stream backdrops, I needed them to be a little bit higher so you could see them over the lowboy. That's going to be kind of the centerpiece in that room. So because of that, we have 34-inch height overall. And then you can see a couple other measurements here. My cross braces are 16.5 inches, and that's really because I'm using 2x6s. And 2x6 is actually 1.5 by 5.5. So I'm accounting for the fact of the thickness of the wood of the frame itself, and then 16.5 inches plus the 3 total for the board in the front and back gives me 19.5. And then over here, I've got 23.5 inch. This is going to be really where the weight of the tank actually rests in both the corners and in the center beam. So I'm going to cut wood at 23.5 that's going to fit in between the top and the bottom braces. So when I do all that, this is my count for my 125. This is the number of pieces I'm going to need at each size. Sorry for the crossouts. I had to make a couple of adjustments there. The 13.5s are the only boards that are not visible on my drawing, and I will show you that as we build. But they're basically going to go in between the front and the back uprights in the corners, and that's going to keep the uprights from ever wanting to come inwards. So that's the first thing that I do. And then over here, I kind of draw it out. I draw out, okay, what do I need? How many boards do I need? What pieces am I going to cut for each board? Try to maximize the usage of each of the 2x6s because we don't want to waste the money. So I draw out the sizes, and then I draw out the board number, and I say, okay, here's the pieces I want to get from each board number. And then over here, I have the supplies, and this is really more for you. Tools that I'm going to be using throughout this build. I'm going to need a saw, and a drill, and a hammer, and a level, and a tape measure, and a pen for marking. I'll need some type of eye protection, and then a file just to kind of, especially when we're cutting the 2x6s, sometimes they splinter a little bit on the ends. And so here's the actual supplies that I need. I needed 12 2x6s, 2 4x8 pieces of plywood. This is optional, but I definitely am going to use plywood on the bottom, so I have shelving on the bottom. So over here, the bottom part of the stand, there's going to be shelving there, but I also am going to put a piece of plywood on the top. I just think that that looks a little bit nicer, and it allows the tank to sit a little bit more flush. If you've got a rimless tank, then this is absolutely necessary on the top. Box screws, I will show you which ones I use, and I'll put a link in the description below. And then I said a half gallon of paint. I'm going to paint these things black. You could probably, if you're doing one, you could probably get away with a quart. And then 1 bottle of wood glue. That is also optional. I use the wood glue in certain places, but I don't use it throughout. So that is basically what I need for this project. Now let's go ahead and let's start building. So I've got some of the wood cut. That's some of the 16.5s. This is some of the 73.5s. I'm going to show you a couple other things. Just, I'm not going to have you watch me do all this and cut all this wood. That's boring. But I am going to point out some things. I just wanted to show you real fast, when you're cutting this wood, there's some things you're going to need. Obviously, you're going to need some type of a saw. When you're cutting the wood, what I like to do is I like to write the actual size of the piece I've cut on all the woods, just so that when you're assembling things, you don't make any mistakes later on, because trust me, you can have some similarly sized pieces of wood, and you can, if you confuse things, trust me, it becomes a big mess. So the other thing that I do is, once I have cut a piece of wood, like this 34-inch piece here, which is one of our uprights for the stand, I now use this piece of wood as the foundation for all the other 34-inch pieces I need to cut. So this is now my standard. That way I am ensured that every single piece is exactly the same. So I actually only measure, using the tape measure, one time. I have a straight edge there, mark the line, and then this piece of wood, I'm going to use it for the other 34-inch pieces. I believe I need 12 in total. So this piece of wood is going to give me 2 34s, and then this one over here will be a 27. I'll measure that. That becomes my standard over here. That was my 16.5-inch standard that I used to cut all of these pieces. So that's pretty much what I'm doing, and I'm just going to go ahead and all those pieces that I showed you, I am going to go ahead and cut all those up, and we're going to be ready to assemble after that. All right, I lied. There's one other thing I want to talk about when it comes to cutting wood. I'm trying to do this with 2 hands. I'm not going to actually start the saw because it's going to be really annoying, and I don't know how easily you're going to see it, but you see the saw blade there and you see that line? You really want to make sure you're ultra consistent about where that saw blade is going to hit that line before you saw each piece of wood, so that you really make sure that each piece of wood is exactly the same size, because that saw blade, it's going to be really hard to focus on the saw blade itself, but it's going to remove about somewhere around almost 1/8 of an inch of wood in between these 2 pieces. And so just keep that in mind, that you are actually removing parts of the wood itself when you cut. So again, with that saw blade, I'm trying to get right on the edge. Basically, I'm trying to remove that line, but again, be real consistent about where you're cutting relative to the line. All right, so here we go. We got all the wood down in the basement. Thank you to Eli. He's the one that carried this all down, because I was pretty tired from cutting all this wood. So this was for 2 stands. Now, you're not going to have nearly this much wood, so don't freak out. I'm showing you wood for 2 of the 125-gallon stands that required 24 2x6s. You're only going to need 12, which is, trust me, a lot better. It took me 3 hours and 15 minutes exactly to cut all this wood for both stands. So if you are somewhat familiar with, you know, a table saw and know how to measure and that kind of stuff, maybe it'll take you an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, maybe a couple hours, but that's okay. Take your time. So for this next part, you can see I've already got the top and bottom frames kind of laid out. They're not together right now. What I'm going to do is I am going to pre-drill some holes. And so I always have 2 drills. You can see the drills over there. I always have 2 drills. You don't need 2 drills. I use it because it makes it convenient. One of the drills is going to have a drill bit. The other one is going to have the bit for the screws that I use, the star bit. And it just makes it go really fast for me. But like I said, you can use 1 drill. It's fine. Now I do pre-drill the holes. And so I'm going to drill 3 holes into each one of the sides of the wood here to connect the 16.5-inch. All right, so we saw those 16.5s. Those are going to be the ones that go in the center and also on the side of the frame. And then I got my 73.5 boards right here, and those are obviously the long parts of the frame, or the long parts of the stand. And I am going to use these bits, or these screws. I love these. These are my absolute favorite. These are the Grip Right, and these are the stainless steel screws, 2.5 by 10s. You can find these at most home improvement stores. You can get them on Amazon. I'll put an Amazon affiliate link down there. These are the only screws I will use. Let me show you why real fast. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. I don't know how well the camera is going to pick this up, but instead of having like a Phillips head, it has a star pattern, and these are far, far, far less prone to stripping out the screws when you are assembling things, and it's just a much tighter grip. And I love them. I will not use anything but these for building all the stands I've ever built. I think I tried to use the Phillips heads one time, and they were a nightmare. So Things you're going to need for the assembly of your stands. Obviously, you're going to need the screws. You're going to need a drill. You're going to need a level. All right, so I've got a larger level here, and that's just to make sure that when I put the uprights in, everything is 100% level. I am not going to actually build the rest of the stand on the carpet. I will take this over to where there is some flat tile. I might even take this upstairs back into the kitchen, but I don't think I'll need to. I think I can build it down here. In fact, that's probably what I'll do, but it's really, really important that when you put the uprights in, which are sitting right here under the level, that you have this thing very, very straight before you start screwing screws in. If you want to use wood glue, you can do that. I don't use wood glue on everything. I will use wood glue on this. So I'll glue it and then go ahead and screw these things in. I will most likely use the wood glue on my supports. So for instance, the uprights, probably. And then also these 23 inches that are actually supporting the weight, I might use wood glue there. But all the 16.5s that are the cross braces that are going on the top and bottom part of the frame, I don't use wood glue there. I don't think it's necessary. And I won't use them for the little 13.5s that are just going to be supporting the legs in between. I'll just screw those in. So that's the only place I'm going to use wood glue. Like I said, the 125 stands are the only time I've ever actually used wood glue. I just wanted to point something out real quick. As you're building these stands, make sure the top where the fish tank is going to rest, this is the frame, right? So it needs to be extremely level. So we want these edges where these two pieces of wood meet to be flush. That also means, believe it or not, sometimes when you buy lumber, even though these are all 2x6s, so they are all supposed to be 1.5 by 5.5, sometimes they're not the same. So we look over here, you see how that's sticking out a little bit? That's why I don't want that side to be the side the tank rests on. So over here, nice and flush. It's not like there's a big gap over here. But over here, you can see it's sticking out. And it's sticking out a good, probably 1/16 of an inch. So what that means a couple things. One, you don't want that part to be the part the tank rests on, because now the tank is going to be lifted on the edge over here on this side, and then all along here there's going to be a gap. Two, it also means when I start putting in the center, the actual bracing for the tank, for the uprights, there might be a little bit of work I have to do to make sure the bottom part of the frame is level, because that's going to now stick down a little bit. So it's not always 100% just because you buy 2x6s and even buy them from the same pallet as I did, that every single piece of wood is going to be exactly the same. I have found that to not be the case sometimes. Okay, so all of the frames are built. We've got one down there that we're going to be working on. We've got one up there. We've got two over there for the other tank. Obviously, if you were building this, you just have that one and this one. This is going to be the top of our stand, and the part that is actually facing the ground is the top of the top. Again, super flush on all four sides. That's what we're looking for. Now, we have to get these 34-inch uprights onto this stand. What I'm going to do, because these are 2x6, is I'm probably going to put 4 screws on the back side, and then I'll do 2 additional screws from the front side. So I'll show you how that all lines up. But here's, again, got the level right there, right? This is where it becomes really important that I make sure when those uprights go in that they're 100% level. Do not just lean them up in that corner and assume just because they are flush against both of those corners that it's 100% level. That's 100% straight. Use a level for this part. I promise you it'll save you problems later on, because if you don't, things are not going to be right. And eventually, this is going to have 1,200 to 1,300 pounds on this stand. We really want to make sure that everything is completely square and level. All right, so when I mean level, and really it is side to side, because the other way will work itself out front to back. But I don't know if you can see that if it's picking it up on camera. We've got a level stand. There are my 4 holes in the back side. Again, I'll drill 2 from the front, but I'm not going to do that until I stand the stand upright. So got to do 3 more of these. All right, so I got the 6 uprights in, the 4 in the corners and the 2 middle support uprights. Again, the big thing here, just make sure everything is level. I put 4 screws, like I mentioned, on the inside for everything. For the middle uprights, obviously they are centered. That's going to optimize their usefulness. And now what we're going to do is we have to put in the actual support pieces that are going to actually take all the weight of the tank. So these are not really taking the weight of the tank. That's why I cut out those 23-inch pieces that are going to go basically over this and extend all the way until we get 5.5 inches from the top and then the bottom frame is going to go in. So I will start putting those in. That's a really quick and easy thing to do, so I will show you that. But most likely what we're going to do is 6 screws there, 2 on the bottom, 2 in the middle, 2 in the top. So let me show you that. All right, so this is what I was talking about. This is the upright that is actually going to hold all of the weight. And you can see here it's that 23-inch piece, and then the bottom frame will go right here. I'm actually going to put upright supports on this corner side as well. I'm going to do that next, and I'll show that to you as well. But that's what we got, 6 screws. 2 in the top, 2 in the middle, 2 in the bottom. All right, so here's the other piece. That's what I was talking about. So now we have a corner, and that corner is going to support the weight of the aquarium. Again, I can't stress this enough. I would pre-drill the holes, especially with 2x6s, and especially when you're drilling into the sides of these other uprights, because basically you're drilling into the side of the tall upright and then the other side of this 23.5-inch. Pre-drilling helps a lot, and really be careful when you're really torquing these screws down. It's easy to split this wood, especially out here. So pre-drill, take your time. That's one corner. I'm going to get the rest done. Sorry, it's a little cramped in the fish room right now, but you can see I've got all of the supports on the stand right now, in the centers and over there in the corner. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to put the 13.5-inch supports down here at the bottom, and that's to keep the legs from, if they ever wanted to kind of come inwards, they're not going to be able to, because there's going to be some 13.5-inch 2x6s down here. Down here, I will do it after I get the other side on as well, but it's just easier to get those ones in when I am not trying to watch my head after putting the top part on. So I'm going to do those first, and I will go ahead and show you what that looks like. All right, so this is what I was talking about. This is that piece. It's 13.5 inches, and it's basically going between this leg and this leg. And again, it's just to give some stability so that these legs underweight would never want to go inwards. So that's going to prevent that from happening. And of course, I did the same thing over here. Now on top of that, obviously I'm going to put in the cross braces down here on this bottom one. And I actually think I'm going to do that next for the same reason I said I wanted to do those next. And that is, it's just a lot easier to work on the cross bracing when you don't have to watch your head for the top part of this thing, which is actually going to be the bottom. But I'm going to put the cross bracing in next, and that's going to give it some rigidity so that the stand doesn't want to torque in either direction. All right, everybody, I've got the cross bracing in. Those were the 16.5s, which is the same thing that was on the very ends. And so you can see here, I used, well, including the ones on the ends, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the other one on the end over there is 8. So it's 8 down here. I will do the same thing to what is going to be the bottom after I flip this over, but I got to get finally, I'm going to get the top, or the bottom part here put on. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, the top frame is on. It is secured. Again, 4 bolts, or 4 screws, sorry, in the inner part on each one. And then I did go ahead and I put 2 on the outers. I still have to do the stuff down there, but I will wait until I flip it over. I also threw a screw in from the side right here. And so I did that for all 4 corners, and then the middles have the 2 screws in the front as well, 4 in the back. Now, what I'm going to be doing next is I'm going to be flipping this thing over because I have to put in the cross bracing here, which is now going to be the bottom. And I need to put those 13.5-inch pieces like I did down there. I need them up here as well because I've only got 1 in here right now. So that's what's next. We're almost done with the actual frame out. But again, this is a little tough to see because it's a big stand. And you can see here, we've got all the stuff done. The top is on, all the cross beams are done. So this is the frame. And by the way, if you wanted to stop right here, this is sufficient to hold the aquarium. There's nothing more you need to do to have a stand for a 125. Now what we're going to do next is I've got the wood here. This is actually cut for both tanks, but we've got all the wrap that's going to go around the top, the plywood that's going to go along the bottom, all the stands that you've seen me build, all the stands that you've seen in the fish room. And by the way, I counted the other day, I've built 17 stands and a whole bunch of varieties. Everything you've seen in the background of our fish room, those were stands that I built. In fact, in our fish room now, we only have a couple that I just purchased for the 75s that I didn't build, and the one that's holding the 150. Everything else, well, that's a stand that I built. So pretty much, for most of the stands that I've built, I paint them black. I put the plywood on the bottom just so I can either use it as a shelf, or a lot of ours were double stands anyway. But if you wanted to, you could stop here. We're going to add the plywood. We're going to paint it black, and I'll show you what that looks like after the plywood has been added. All right, for this last part, and that was the part where I added the top and the sides and the front, you're going to need some nails. So that was the reason why I had the 4 pieces of plywood. I just cut the top 70, I think it was 74, because I had a 1/4 inch overhang on each side with the wrap. So it was, the top was 74 by 19.5. The sides were 19.5 deep, and then they were 34 high. And then the front, again, I wanted to cover both the side panels and then also kind of cover the top a little bit. And so I went, even though the stand is 34, because you've got the top there, that's a 1/4. All this is 1/4 inch plywood. I would recommend, if you really want to do a slightly better job, use probably 3/8 or even 1/2 inch if you really want a nice looking wrap. I'm painting this all black, so I know it looks a little like, wow, dude, I don't know about this. Trust me, when I paint it black, a lot of the imperfections kind of fade away, as does that wood grain, and it just looks like a black stand. So I have 2 front panels there, so I cut one big giant. It was 74, right, because the stand is 73.5 plus a 1/4 inch on each side for the side panels, the wrap. So it was 74, and then I did 34.25. So that's how that works. Now, in terms of the front panel, then once I had that, I just cut it right down the center, and it's cheap, and it's going to be quick access, and it doesn't need to be awesome. If you've got woodworking skills, you can go ahead and put trim around the edges and everything like that. You could certainly put hinges, you could put doors on here. I didn't want to do that. So right now I just needed to hold it 125, paint it black, have it blend in. The stand is not the focal point here, and it's not really going to stand out very much at all. Keep in mind, it's also way brighter in here because I've got a fluorescent light shining than it's ever actually going to be in here. So between painting it a dark color and having the lights a little bit lower, it's really not going to show off. Now let me show you here. I'm going to go ahead and take this top panel off here. And again, it just lifts off. I've got 2 screws. So I got a screw there and a screw there, and it just hangs. And so there's the bottom. Again, if you really wanted to go the extra mile, you could put 1 piece down here. These were just 19.5 by 27. That's what they wound up both being. You could see here I don't have plywood in the center, and I also don't have plywood over there. So I just have 2 shelves. If you wanted to do the entire bottom with plywood, you could do that, but then you've got to mess around and cut around the center stands, and then you've got to cut around here. I didn't feel like doing that again. It's going to serve a purpose. There's going to be a canister filter down here, maybe some buckets and some hoses. This will work just fine. So the next step with this thing, and really the last thing, is to paint. Now, I'm not going to paint the inside. I'm going to paint the front frame because there's a chance that some of that could be exposed, but I'm not going to paint inside. I'm not doing that for 2 reasons. 1, you're not going to see it unless the doors are off, and that's hardly ever going to be the case. And 2, why bother? It's just a bunch of extra work. So you're not going to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing painted black, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. And this is what the stand finally looked like. It is painted black. Like I said, the whole point was we didn't want to see the stand really out there. It kind of blends in. This is the natural light of the room. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. And again, it was $150, not $1,200. Yes, it took about a day for me to build this stand from start to finish, but it was well worth it. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.